So about a month ago, I made a video analyzing the Blur album The Ballad of Darren, dissecting its lyrics and themes of heartbreak and depression, and it made me draw a lot of parallels between that album and the other Blur album about heartbreak and depression, 13. 13 was made during a really hard time in Blur's career. Tension was running high within the group due to creative differences and just general resentment. Graham was dealing with alcoholism, and Damon was going through a high-profile breakup with his girlfriend of 7 years, as well as a heroin addiction. The band was in a really bad place, and it's a miracle they even managed to make this album in the first place. 13 at its core is an album born out of absolute emotional turmoil, and that's very apparent with not only the lyrics, but the sound of the album. This album is an absolute mess in the best way possible. It sounds nothing like anything the band had ever made before, and it stands to this day as their most experimental and out there record, with its blaring and distorted guitars provided by Graham Coxon. The sound of this album can be harrowing at times, and it's a legitimately uncomfortable listen due to how emotionally raw and frankly dark it gets, but that's exactly what makes this album amazing. Every song on this album is either about drugs, depression, or both. Plus, most of these songs are really long, like 7 to 8 minutes. Anyway, let's get into these tracks. The way this album starts is kind of a sick joke that Blur is pulling on the audience, but we'll get more into that on the second track. The basic gist of this song is, love is the greatest and most fulfilling thing you could possibly achieve in this life, but unfortunately, the love of my life has just left me. Yeah, at first this track seems like a very positive and happy love song with the catchy and sweet melodies, the big gospel choir in the chorus, and the general feelings of joy the song brings out of you, but when you really start to dig into the lyrics of the album, you realize this isn't at all a happy song. It's just disguised to sound like one. It's basically trying to comfort yourself and convince yourself that it's worth it to keep going after you've been heartbroken. And that makes it the perfect way to open this album.
Come on, come on, come on. Love's the greatest thing.
This song is the reason why I said the beginning of the song was like a sick joke, because after that sweet sounding and acoustic lullaby of a track, we get our senses assaulted with these blaring guitars drowned in distortion, and demented sounding vocals screaming in our ears. I genuinely think they put this song right after Tender as a joke, because the whiplash I got when I first heard this album was insane. Anyway, Bugman is about Damon trying to avoid running into his drug dealer and going through heroin withdrawals while trying to quit. The dealer is called the Bugman, and the whole song is such a paranoid feel to it, as if he's terrified of being pulled back into that cycle of self-harm after barely getting out alive. He's gotta watch himself, hang on, and look out for the Bugman. Coffee and TV is the second Blur song to have Graham sing the lead vocals instead of Damon, with the first one being You're So Great off of the record before this one. This is my favorite song on the album, and it's in my top 3 favorite Blur songs of all time. It's just a magnificent track and has some of the best instrumental performances of the entire band's discography. Everyone's on their A game on this track. Anyway, the song itself is about Graham trying to quit alcohol and the struggles that come with that. Drinking was something that helped with his anxiety and trouble speaking to others, so without it, he feels lost and alone in this world. He tries to replace substance abuse with less harmful vices, such as drinking coffee and watching TV. But for some people, facing the world sober is a terrifying thing, especially when you're constantly in the public eye. Swamp Song is another song about heroin, and it is effed up. The whole thing is meant to replicate the feeling of being completely out of your mind due to drugs, and as someone who's never done drugs in their entire life, I think the song does a pretty great job. We've never heard vocals like this from Damon, and we never really do again after this song. He genuinely sounds insane on this track as he screams and shouts his way over this stumbling and abrasive instrumental. Swamp Song is honestly pretty unnerving when you know what it's about, but it still goes super hard regardless.
Going into business.
1992 feels like a journey through a dark, wet, and dangerous tunnel, as it spends the entire track building up, getting more and more intense before suddenly it gets drowned in an ocean of guitar feedback and distortion. The song is really tense and claustrophobic, and the instrumental mostly speaks for itself, but the little lyrics are display feelings of anger and resentment towards an ex-partner. 1992 is strange in all the best ways. Also, P.S. Never listen to this song on a plane. Worst mistake of my life. This is one of the less serious songs on the album, as it's basically just a diss track against Blur's record label at the time, EMI. Every band who was signed under EMI during this time seemed to absolutely hate them, which I find hilarious. Anyway, this song is a dig at manufactured pop and how it feels like they're all just copying each other, which almost feels like a precursor to Gorillaz. Not a very deep song emotionally speaking, but it works perfectly as a fun little palate cleanser after the tension set by 1992. Damon apparently started writing this song while on a make-it-or-break-it vacation with his partner that would determine whether or not they could salvage a relationship, and well, the fact this album exists shows they couldn't. This song feels like a tsunami of synths crashing into you, and the impact is felt throughout the entire track. It's a song about a battle, whether that be a battle with substance abuse, an ex-partner, or a battle with oneself. The entire track beams with anxiety and tension, much like 1992, but to an even higher level, and that screaming guitar that Graham plays towards the end is absolutely haunting every time I hear it.
I lift my street, I'm a guillotine.
Mellow Song is, well, a mellow song. It's pretty self-explanatory. The song starts off as a very simple and stripped-back acoustic guitar ballad, with Damon singing in a very dejected and melancholic way, but then after the second chorus, the beat drops and the entire band comes in, and it turns into this really sick jam session with an incredible melodica solo by Damon. The track's lyrics deal with themes of heartbreak and drug addiction, and wondering if it's even possible to get out of the rut you've dug yourself into. Is this where I'm going to? We'll see. This song was apparently written for South Park and was actually performed live a year before 13 even came out, but it didn't end up making it, so they decided to use it for this album. It's a really cool trip-hop song that honestly sounds reminiscent of what Damon would be doing for the first Gorillaz album a few years after this one, with its lo-fi drums and hip-hop influence. Matter of fact, a few of these songs sound like they could fit in the first Gorillaz album, but this song sounds the most like it in my opinion. It's also the only track I don't have much to speak on in terms of lyrics, cause mostly an instrumental. This is definitely the least heavy track on the record, and just serves as a nice chill little number before we get to the heaviest song on the record. This song is absolutely harrowing. It's the most blunt that Damon gets in terms of his struggles with drugs, and the soundscape of this track is just so full of turmoil. It's seriously the most effed up song on the record. It starts out as a very slow burn, with Damon sounding as broken and dejected as ever, but towards the middle, the drop happens, and we get this part that sounds like you're descending further and further down an endless dark void. I'm not trying to get too emo, but this song is seriously the most haunting track the band has ever written, and it's the darkest song on the record. Trimm Trabb feels like the real climax of the album, and much like Caramel, it starts out as a pretty slow burn. According to Graham, this song is about the anxiety of the mundane and feeling trapped in your life with zero way to escape. The song starts out as a catchy acoustic guitar number with a hook that's almost reminiscent of Modern Life is Rubbish due to how poppy and ear-catching it is. But then towards the middle, the acoustic guitar is replaced with an electric, and the song gets a lot more heavy and loud. But then, after the last chorus, the beat drops, and it feels like the absolute breaking point the entire album has been leading up to, as we hear the most abrasive sounds in the entire record and harrowing screams. This is the best part of the entire album, especially when put in context with the rest of it. After the hardest, loudest, and angriest track on the album, we get the quietest and saddest. No Distance Left to Run takes the cake as the most depressing song in Blur's entire discography, right beside Goodbye Albert. After all the anger, frustration, and resentment throughout the entire record, we get nothing but resignation and acceptance that it's really over, and there's nothing you could really do to fix it. It's over, you don't need to tell me, and I hope you're someone who makes you feel safe when you're sleeping tonight. I won't kill myself trying to stay in your life. Damon apparently cried while recording this song, and I can see why. It isn't some power ballad begging to get back together, it's begrudging acceptance, because what else can you really do at that point? The decision has been made, and the initial spark is gone, so all you can really do is move on. That wasn't supposed to rhyme, but it did. So this track works perfectly as the final song on the album. So why is there still one more song? So Blur likes to do this thing sometimes where they'll have a perfectly fine closing track for an album, but then they'll put some little 1-minute instrumental at the end. I never really understood why they did this, to be honest. Like, it takes away from the momentum of songs like This Is So Low and Resigned, and it never feels necessary in my opinion. But out of all the outro instrumental tracks, this is the one that's the most understated, and that honestly makes me like it a lot more, as it isn't nearly as flashy as Lot 105 or Commercial Break. It's just a nice little lo-fi instrumental, not entirely necessary, but nowhere near as distracting as the other ones. So that's 13, one of Blur's best albums. I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with this one though, because it is really experimental, but it is a really good album, so I recommend it. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Goodbye.